Hello, welcome to the channel. I'm Coach Deidre. Today we're going to explore the trending buzzword empathy and empathy versus compassion. What does that look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And what sense do you have of the difference between empathy and compassion? Have you no empathy? I heard shouted on the news. But what does that mean to have no empathy? Is it necessarily and always a good thing? For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to argue that our society confuses empathy and compassion, much to its own detriment. Lately, our culture seems to have some twisted way of replacing compassion with an unrealistic and non-functional version of empathy. So, what is empathy? In short, it is the ability or willingness to feel another's pain, to put yourself in their situation and feel it. Parent to child, between spouses, and between twins, there is reportedly the ability for one person to literally, physically feel the pain of the other person. That is true empathy. Typical empathy is more of an understanding of the pain of another without really feeling it physically, but only feeling it emotionally. Being fully aware of what they are feeling either by imagining what it is like or because of a similar personal experience where the pain can be recalled and allow a person to put themselves into the feeling of pain. So it's like when you witness someone experiencing pain, maybe you saw them hit their elbow and you feel that twinge of ghost pain, remembering the last time you hit your elbow. That is a feeling of empathy. Empathy is deeper than sympathy. Sympathy is simply feeling for someone, feeling sorry for someone. Empathy goes beyond that, feeling with someone. Sympathy is feeling for them. Empathy is feeling with them. Empathy sounds like a positive human trait, and it can be. It can be a driving factor in not doing harm to others. If you feel their pain, you may hesitate to inflict or be the cause of their pain. Empathy is strongly and deeply rooted in emotion. So it can drive guilt, possibly even sadness or withdrawal, particularly if an empathetic person perceives that they have caused someone pain. The possibility that an empathetic person can be led to a dark emotional place is why empathy can warrant compartmentalization, especially in certain settings. It is one thing to have empathy for and feel the pain of family and close friends, but feeling the pain of every coworker in the corporation would be overwhelming and it could easily become detrimental to health and success. Compartmentalizing empathy can show up as the more surface level version known as sympathy, or sometimes even interpreted as apathy. People who may be very empathetic or even overly empathetic outside of work may come across colder and more distant at work for their own survival. It is likely you know someone who is very empathetic that would likely take a stance that harms themselves if they thought it was the emotionally driven right thing to say or do for someone else's benefit. That is why empathy may or may not always be a good trait. It is one of those things that can be taken to a self-destructive place without some type of compartmentalization or offset. This is where current trends seem to be going awry. There is no focus on the fact that unchecked empathy is an emotion that can be twisted into something destructive. Rather, it seems like some may be stroking empathetic reactions in a desire to get a destructive response. Functional and useful way for empathy to be compartmentalized and tempered is by viewing and using empathy in conjunction with grounding actions and thoughts. This is where empathy moves into the realm of compassion. Compassion takes feelings of empathy and mixes it with logic and action, keeping those feelings tempered, prioritized, or in check. Raw empathy alone rarely drives solution-oriented action. It is just a feeling. It is a reaction-provoking emotion. Adding a desire to do something about someone's pain is compassion. The most compassionate people just don't do something trivial. They help to find a positive, workable, and reasonable solution. The most famous example of compassion is Mother Teresa. If she were just empathetic, she may just have sat with the lepers and felt their pain with them, cried with them, perhaps become overwhelmed with the volume of pain surrounding her. Instead, she was compassionate and joyful in her service to others. She tempered her empathy with actions that helped soothe the pain, to make a real difference in the lives of the people she helped. She could not cure them, she could not take away their pain, but she could lessen and share their burden in a way that made a difference. Her desire to help, her compassion, allowed her to compartmentalize empathy so that it did not become debilitating. Mother Teresa is an extraordinary example of compassion, giving to others despite the cost to herself, yet doing so in a logical, sustainable, and meaningful way. It is likely you have an example in your life, maybe a friend, a family member, or perhaps it is you who will listen attentively to someone's pain anytime, day or night. But then you must always ask them how you can help or offer ideas that you think will help. Seems people like this just can't passively listen. They are demonstrating their compassion, trying to help alleviate the pain, and they are likely very sincere with that offer to help. This compassion can be mistaken for being insincere, trying to be a know-it-all, or even interpreted as a way to end the conversation, which is a little unfair. A compassionate person really wants to help. If you were to say to them, "What I need right now is a drink and a shoulder to cry on," it is highly likely they would drop what they are doing and have a drink with you and let you cry on their shoulder if they thought it was what you needed, what would help you. They would be there for you. However, at some point, too much listening without any action or thoughts or ideas would frustrate them. All right, getting back to current culture. The difference between empathy and compassion comes down to what a person does with that emotion. Someone feeling strong empathy may react with some type of reaction, such as shouting, anger, crying, even hate, which are more emotions. There's no logic, no plan, no desire to make the situation better, softer, or easier for the others involved. We see a lot of empathy, sometimes slightly crazy empathy on the news. But an empathetic reaction rarely involves doing the work that would make a lasting difference. It tends to be more noise and clickbait. One current event example is the opposition to data centers. There are heated feelings around data centers. There are real concerns. However, there are two different approaches. One is the empathetic approach that is inflammatory, wants everything halted, stopped, moved, not in my backyard. And while those are valid feelings, when the most passionate and empathetic people are interviewed, they seem to only be talking about a triggered response, such as, "I heard a resident saying the noise will make their life unbearable." Or, "I saw a family on the news that looks so sad because their view is now a huge, unsafe looking data center." Or, Environmentalists say that we will run out of water for our wildlife, and that's so unfair. For some reason, the modern trend is to most vigorous and empathetic people are those who are not directly affected, almost as if empathy has been attached to an emotion of guilt or unfairness, to the point that they can no longer see the other side of the issue or the fact that something can be done. Around data centers, some of the logic that is that they will happen somewhere and somehow. So logically, they're happening somewhere, somehow. So why not be part of making them happen in a responsible way? Just pushing them into another community does not ensure safety for your community. However, being part of integration and regulations, you may be able to help ensure safety for everyone. One personal reason I find it so illogical to just move data centers somewhere else is that we live just a few miles from a nuclear power plant, which for years was on the list of the most horrible things to live near. Now, it is fine as long as we don't get one of those monster data centers. They both have risks that need to be mitigated, but with positive community interaction and less emotional reaction, we have a better chance of mitigating those risks. In today's world of clickbait and incendiary commentary, the ability to compartmentalize empathy is growing in importance. Being able to compartmentalize or prioritize your empathy allows you to check that emotional reaction against truth and logic. You can then step back for a moment and make a decision as to whether your action or reaction is making little more than noise. Are your actions going to solve this problem, move toward a solution, and just create clickbait? For a more modern logical test, keep in mind that if it's a reaction that causes clickbait, it's not working toward a solution. Like Mother Teresa, true compassion is often quieter than those working to personally make things better. They usually don't have time for the noise. I expand exactly on how the structural empathy impacts vacation patterns and all that we do in my upcoming book. Here's a personal example of empathy versus compassion. I have very strong empathy for domestic animal abuse. It physically angers and sickens me. I am often moved to donate to causes that show true compassion for abused animals. I know that I am not emotionally strong enough to work directly with animals myself, that I would struggle to compartmentalize my empathy and would not be effective in helping personally. If I walked into a situation and saw animals in serious neglect and hurtful situation, I'd probably cry, be very sad or angry, maybe even lash out at the abuser if they were present. And I would have non-productive and unhelpful reactions. While I fall short of being personally capable of compassion in these situations, I actively support those who are and can be effective and compassionate because it's important to me. I feel the pain and I want to help. So this is my way of being compassionate instead of just empathetic. So I ask you, are you empathetic or compassionate? Which do you think is better for society? And how can we help deeply empathetic people become compassionate? Thank you for reviewing this with me, considering it, and hopefully we can all make our society better with more compassion and less raw empathy.